I want to go through a graphic that I made. I want to go through a graphic that I made so that you can see what Zionism says versus what Zionism does. I've been sharing this all over the internet over the last couple of days because I need people to really, number one, understand very clearly. Number one, I want to repeat again. And I know I don't have to continue to repeat this for this audience because you are an audience of good faith. But I do know that there are going to be plenty of people who watch the clips that I'm going to clip of this and put out myself. And they're going to say, oh, there's another black preacher, just an anti-Semite. No, the problem I have with you all has nothing to do with your faith. It has nothing to do with the trauma that you have endured. In fact, it's been difficult for me to have to come to such vocal terms against you, but I guess that's kind of what genocide do to you. You know, I've had to expose myself in this way, not having as vehement opposition to the occupation as I should have had. You know, sometimes we look at a status quo and we just let the status quo be for the sake of peace in our lives. Never forget, I'm sitting around with, am I going to say the name? Yeah, David Pakman in Boston. I was using his studio at the time. And somehow we got on the two-state solution. We got on Palestine and Israel. And he essentially just shut down the whole conversation as it's so much more complicated than that. Now, truthfully, at the time, I did not have the intellectual ammunition to let him know, no, bitch, it's not more complicated than that. And I was silent, not silent. I wasn't aggressive. There's a difference between being silent and being aggressive. Not nearly as aggressive as I am, not nearly as equipped as I am. And I think this is why knowledge is so critical in this, because if you are a person who has had a history of standing with the Jewish people, let's start there, standing with the Jewish people. And as an extension of you standing with the Jewish people, you have indirectly or tacitly stood with Israel. Never been a Zionist, never been one to ignore the plight of the Palestinian people. But because your position was standing up for Jewish people because of the history of what they had been through, you allowed ambiguity to exist in relation to the occupation of Palestine. And without the information and the knowledge necessary to strike at the core of this idea that it's so much more complicated, then you're not really you're not useful. I wasn't useful. I wasn't useful in the conversations I used to try to have with David Pakman over Israel and Palestine. Wasn't useful when with several other people who turned out to be Zionists in my life. Yeah, not all of them Jewish people. I've had some black Zionists who have been in my life, and I'm looking back in retrospect, and I'm like, oh, that's why you were there. That's why you were paying attention to me. That's why you used to make calls to me. And every time we had a call, it ended up being something. So just kind of retrospectively looking through my life, I realized, wait a minute. What Zionism says and what it does, a structural breakdown of contradiction, alignment, and harm. In the left-hand corner, the red column, what Zionism says is the problem. What Zionism, and what I did last week was I took a tweet from Benjamin Netanyahu as he was pointing to USAID, and he was looking at the funds from USAID, and he was pointing to how USAID ends up helping all of these factions that are left-leaning that are a problem from his perspective for Israel. It was a little simple chart, and from that simple chart, I deconstructed it, and I, do what I do, and then I threw in my formulations and my calculus into AI, and 5 minutes later, I had this chart, beautifully made. And AI was so mad that it wouldn't make any graphics for me for the rest of the day. I lied to you not. After I got this, I mean, I steamrolled Chat GPT with such a quick analysis that formulated this exact thing. Everything that you're going to say, all of this came immediately out of AI. I say 5 minutes, but I say about 10 minutes. 10 minutes after I saw that tweet from Benjamin Netanyahu, I had AI crunch this out, and the accuracy of it is so brilliant, as well as the fact that it would not make images for me for the rest of the day. I said, okay, fine. You did this one, and this is good enough. And so the premise was, here are human rights organizations. Look at this left-hand column, right? Here are human rights organizations that are doing things that they are now defining, they being Zionists, are defining as a problem for Zionism, for Israel. Right. So who Zionism says is a problem? Let's go down the list. They say human rights organizations are the problem. In the left-hand column, legal aid for Palestinians is a problem. Israeli peace activists are a problem. The progressive Jewish groups are a problem. Whistleblowers and army refusers are the problem. Journalists documenting state violence are a problem, so much so that they are killing them. And that American Jewish critics are the problem. And that the international NGOs are the problem. This is literally what the Likud party and Benjamin Netanyahu and Zionists have to say all day long, every day, because these are the groups that are pointing out that this is clearly a genocide. And so now Zionists and Benjamin Netanyahu, they're saying every one of them are a problem. Every one of them are anti-Semitic. Every one of them, even American Jews. Right here. Oh, you guys can't see my mouse on the screen, can you? Oh, yes, you can. Jewish people who criticize Zionism are considered the problem by Benjamin Netanyahu. So here's who, but look at in the middle, who Zionism actually partners with. Who do they actually partner with? Far-right U.S. politicians, the true anti-Semites, the group of people who don't listen. And here's where I know the people of good faith, those of you in the audience, I know you get it, but I want to say this. There's a different reason that I oppose Zionism than what Nick Fuentes is opposing Zionism for. Conservatives, even evangelical Christians, well, actually, evangelical Christians, they're not going to oppose it. They're actually going to support it because they believe that they have to reclaim the Temple Mount for Jesus to come back. So let me take Christian Zionists off of that. They're clearly going to support them to no end, except the fact that this week, when they understood that there was a Christian church, an ancient Christian church that had been bombed by Israel, then all of a sudden you saw some Christian Zionists come and speak out as if nobody else's life mattered. Mike Huckabee, ambassador to Israel. Nothing else mattered before then. You only got upset, Mike Huckabee, when they bombed a church, when Israel bombed a church. But I digress. Let me stay focused. In the middle column, who Zionism actually partners with? Far-right U.S. politicians, the MAGA movement, full of true anti-Semites who hate Jews just because they're Jews. But here is who Benjamin Netanyahu and Zionists are aligning with right now. Christian Zionists, we already went over that. Authoritarian leaders across the globe, Hungary, India, and Brazil. Settler movements. Of course, they're going to align with settler movements because they are themselves a settler movement. The military industrial actors. Of course, they need the weapons. Of course, they're going to align with these institutions. White nationalists who, quote unquote, like Israel. I love that this came out with quotes on it, because the only reason they like Israel is because they might hate Muslims just a bit more. And when I say Muslims, they're not going to count the fact that Gaza has millions, or rather hundreds of thousands of Arab Christians there, Palestinian Christians there. No, they just see if your skin is brown and you're from a Middle Eastern sounding country, that these white supremacists see you as a Muslim. anti-democratic global networks. Look at the people who Israel, through Benjamin Netanyahu, who they are aligning with. People, groups, and organizations that genuinely hate the Jewish people simply because they are Jewish. And who do they point to? They say, oh no, look at those people like Ben Dixon, that Pastor Ben. He's anti-Semitic. He's the anti-Semite. Why? Because we oppose your genocide. Last column, how Zionism justifies itself. Number one, bullet one, it equates any criticism with anti-Semitism. It doesn't matter if it's a baby. Oh, Lord, the video we saw, that child who half the body was missing this week. The entire bottom half of the body of that child was missing, and the parent was carrying that child, trying to get some dignity for that child in death. And when we speak out against that, we're anti-Semitic. This second bullet was so important. Uses Jewish trauma to excuse state violence. Column 3, bullet 2. This is on my timeline. I have it on my timeline multiple times. If you want to get this, please do go get it and feel free to use it. But that second bullet there, uses Jewish trauma to excuse state violence. Isn't that what Benjamin Netanyahu, isn't that what Zionism is doing? Isn't that exactly the core of Zionism? From the beginning. See, when I used to try to politely have these conversations with my friend, I'm sure we probably don't refer to each other as friends right now, but David Packman. See, I didn't really know what the Nakba was, right? And I didn't really understand the history of how Israel was born. Not, I understood that it was a state that was created by the United Nations resolution, right? But the carry out and the process of it becoming a state, and I'm bringing that up here, is because from day one, from the inception, from the very inception in the mind of was it Theodore Herzl? His first name escapes me, but his last name is certainly Herzl. In the late 19th century, it utilized the precarious position of Jews distributed around the globe as a diaspora as a justification for an ideology that will later come into fruition as a full state violence of Zionism. Bullet 3 says defending power equals defending Jews. That's the one. There's no level of violence that has not been used to say, but we're defending Jews. No, you're not. You're not defending the Jewish people. If anything, you are putting the Jewish people in a far more dangerous situation. Why? Because now when we remember the Holocaust, we can't remember the Holocaust without going right to the Holocaust of Palestine. All for what? A new settlement? Some new condominiums? Some beach property? They have put the Jewish people globally in a far worse position because Zionism has equated the state of Israel with Jewish people. Not us. We're trying to do our best to let people know, hey, the Jewish people are not the state of Israel. The state of Israel is not the Jewish people. But Zionists have to conflate that in order to justify their violence and to justify their use of power, because they want you to think that defending their power is defending the Jews. They label disagreement as disloyalty. Have you seen the way? Have you seen the way they're going out after Katie Halper, Max Blumenthal? Jewish people in the United States of America who are speaking out vehemently against the state of Israel, they mark them. They say they can't even come back to Israel. Well, I'm sure they don't want to go back there. But if you are not a Zionist, then you are labeled as disloyal. Portrays aid and activism as foreign threats. The food that's necessary to keep the children and the parents in Gaza alive is right at the border. But they blockaded it because they consider that a threat. Claim security while fueling conflict. You know, who was that did an interview? Some podcasters did an interview with Benjamin Netanyahu. Could I do an interview with you, Benjamin Netanyahu? Can we just? I just want to talk with you. I just want to ask you questions. I couldn't possibly be a threat to you. I'm too small. I'm too peaceful. Claim security while fueling conflict. Their actions, the actions of the Likud party, the actions of Benjamin Netanyahu, the actions of the regime in control of Israel, the many wars that they have started, the fronts, Syria, just recently bombing Damascus. Benjamin Netanyahu is truly on this campaign that he believes is going to be the birth of the Greater Israel Project. If you haven't seen that, I'm sorry I don't have those graphics for you, but the Greater Israel Project requires the decimation of several nations, mostly Muslim nations, Arabic nations. It is the hope of every imperialist to grow their empire. Let's keep going because I want to end. I want to end with something very, very clear. Builds alliances with enemies of the Jewish. Builds alliances with enemies of the Jewish. This is the one that gets me. They build alliances with enemies of Jewish safety. When you align with the far right, with every nation across this globe, let me say that better. When you align with the far right movements in every nation across this globe, you are aligning with the people who want to harm Jewish people simply because they are Jewish. And then they look at those of us who are like, hold on. Number one, we were never going to go along with you for genocide. Number two, shame on us for either being silent or uninformed, not informed enough to be able to not go along with you in your occupation. But now you are turning on those of us who have stood with the Jewish people because we stand with the oppressed no matter where we find them. And you expected us to stand with you as you turned into or revealed yourself to be the apex oppressor. Because you've been an oppressor since the inception of the idea of Zionism, especially once it required you to expel 700,000 Palestinians in the first Nakba. I've had a little time with history this week, and again, y'all, some of this is a Black-centered conversation. So, I love you all, but just let me have it out. I'm just gonna say it out loud. Doesn't mean that I'm expecting you to give commentary on it. Not Maynard. Let's start with the ones that Coretta Scott King, Dr. Martin Luther King, Bayard Rustin. That's the name. Especially Bayard Rustin, Rosa Parks, all of them writing letters and statements in support of Zionism in the 60s. Bayard Rustin, the most vocal of them all, saying that to be anti-Zionist is to be racist. Now, of course, this is a direct result of the number of Jewish people who stood with them during the civil rights movement, for sure. But then I paused, I said, wait a minute, wait. The Nakba had already occurred by then, right? Right. So I'm Googling, I'm AI and I was like, God dog it. Yeah. How you could be so right on so much and then so wrong on that last piece. Of course, I'm not going to use that to dishonor the memory of our elders, but it is to say that for every Dr. King, there was a Malcolm X, Stokely Carmichael, who saw very clearly that the fight here in the United States for civil rights could not be divorced or be silent on what was happening in Palestine even then. But now a whole new generation of us have been born, and with clear eyes of knowledge. What do I mean? That once we learned what the hell was going on, you can't play that game with me. Somebody said, well, Dr. King was a Zionist. Dr. King was wrong. What are we doing here? What you think I can't? There are no sacred cows. There are no venerated ancestors so much that we can't identify what they got wrong. Oh, you're anti-Semitic because Bayard Rustin. No, Bayard Rustin was wrong. He was loud and wrong. Oh, you're dishonoring Coretta Scott King. No, I'm not, because later on in Coretta Scott King's life, she corrected herself. She wrote another letter making it clear that what was happening to the Palestinian people. You just want us to remember when she spoke in support of Zionism. You don't want us to remember when she came full circle and said, wait a minute, now I can't ride with y'all. They build alliances right here, the second to last bullet in the third column. They build alliance with enemies of Jewish safety while making enemies of the very people who stood with them, even at times when we shouldn't have stood it with you. But because we won't go along with you in genocide, and to all those black folks who are, I know there's a lot of white folks, and I know I'm talking to our diverse audience. I know I'm not talking to my precisely black audience, but I just thinking of a couple of names. A couple of names. Oh, how you have been silent. Let me throw one out for the wolves, because I don't really consider him black anyway. Richie Torres. He's black passing. One of the loudest supporters of this genocide. We ought to rip that melanin right out of your skin, brother. Because we have no requirement to go with people into becoming the oppressors ourselves. And then we have to retroactively look and accept the fact that they were already oppressors when we stood with them the first time, or when we were silent when they were occupying, or when we were too uninformed or not aggressive enough. We have to look in the mirror and say, dang, we got that wrong. They pretend, last bullet, they pretend repression equals protection. The bottom, the shield area. These are people and institutions that hold people accountable. That's who Zionism says is a threat. Far right column. This isn't conspiracy. It is a repeatable formula. Yeah, well, yeah, that's for sure, because what you're going to find are these exact techniques that we've outlined here is at the core of every imperialist movement, of every oppressive group. They must make these what we're calling self-destructive paradoxes. It's a self-undermining paradox to align yourself with the very people who hate you simply because you are you, Benjamin Netanyahu. Zionism, to align with Donald Trump, to align with MAGA, to align with Christian nationalism, to align with all of the different nationalist groups. That is a self-undermining paradox that is going to make you implode. The actions, all of these actions that Zionism uses to justify itself, those are actions that are going to inevitably make it collapse underneath its own paradoxes. You cannot operate in the way that Zionism operates, or empire operates, or white supremacy operates, and expect it not to collapse. And every time it gets close to collapsing, what does it do? It goes and starts another war so that it can live to oppress another day. Zionism doesn't protect Jews. And in doing so, it turns your values, your allies, and your safety into enemies. This isn't about Judaism. It's about a political system that now uses Jewish fear to serve authoritarian goals. It calls justice dangerous. It silences dissent. And it shakes hands with those who hate Jews, so long as they allow for and praise the power of Zionism. That is the evil of Zionism. That is the clarity that we must have when we fight back against this demon that is Zionism. We must save all of the AI spell, big old doesn't with an E, or rather with an A. What am I saying? My eyes are betraying me. We must have precision in our arguments and precision in our understanding of what they are doing, they being Zionist. Be sure that every time you speak, you never let it come out of your mouth. Identify those pronouns. Who's behind the pronouns? When I say they, I'm talking about Zionists. When I say Zionist, I'm not talking about the Jewish people. I'm talking about the political movement, many of whom are not even Jewish because they're not a part of the faith. Benjamin Netanyahu is not a practicing observer of the Torah. This is why we should amplify and elevate the voices of the Jewish diaspora, as well as rabbis who are very clear about the fact that Zionism doesn't represent them. We must speak with precision. Why? Because every word that we say will be used against us. Do you understand what I'm saying? We must speak with precision because every word that we say will be used against us. And so as we continue to speak out against the horrors that we see,
the Zionist regime, desecration of the ancient sacred Jewish cemetery Yahud. The demonstration is called by the Orthodox Rabbinical Union of the United States and Canada in cooperation with the Asra Kaddish organization. As we stand here in Manhattan, at the same time in Yahud, courageous anti-Zionist Jews are standing in defense of the ancient Jewish graves under brutal, violent assault and arrest by the Zionist police forces. Zionist police forces are seeking to erase our sacred past. According to Judaism, which teaches the existence of life after death, digging graves is a serious sin. Of course, this terrible tragedy and crime could only take place in the state calling itself Israel. Which was established by heretics against the will of all leading Torah authorities, since the Torah expressly forbids the existence of a Jewish state during a divinely decreed exile. Throughout its existence, The Zionist state has trampled on every law of the Torah with impunity and viciously oppressed all those who stood in its way. And today, as many Jews protested, today, Tuesday, July 22, as many Jews protested at the site of the grave digging in Yahud, the Zionist police violently arrested many among them 3 young boys who proudly refused to serve in the Zionist army.
Precision in our speech, amplifying and elevating the voices of Jewish people who are doing this fight themselves, ensuring that we educate ourselves both in terms of our own education, but it's our history, because our history will be used against us. Oh, the civil rights leaders were Zionists. Yeah, and they were wrong. And here's why. And understanding the arguments as precisely as we can, so that we never allow ourselves to be trapped by a movement that has taken its trauma. Let me rephrase that. A movement that has taken the trauma of Jewish people and turned it into the very fuel that's necessary to become the traumatizers. They've taken the victimhood of the Jewish people and they've used it to become the victimizers. They've taken the oppression of the Jewish people and used it to justify becoming oppressors. That's the evil of Zionism. And that's what we must stand against. And I'm afraid that we're nowhere near what's necessary to stop it. We're nowhere near a time that it's going to end because of how freely they have moved all around the globe to do everything that they want to do, to bomb indiscriminately, and it's almost like they're looking around and saying, who's going to stop us?